So we're now at the fourth window, and this is the one about fire. O ye fire and heat, bless ye the Lord. There's both splendour and terror in this painting. We're here at the story of Elijah on Mount Carmel with the prophets of Baal. And in the central piece, there's the altar which Elijah has built to the Lord. There's a sacrifice on the altar, and it's been doused with water, jugfuls of water, to make it even more impressive, that fire will come down from heaven and consume the offering. And the fire here is almost like lightning, isn't it? Lightning striking the sacrifice, and there's this blood red fire in the background, very, very rich. You can almost feel its heat. And Elijah sort of standing to one side. There's Elijah in the right-hand panel there, stepping away, and again, face raised up towards heaven. And all the little faces in the right panel as well, also looking up, that are near his feet. And then the prophets of Baal are on the left, and it looks there to be a representation of a temple to Baal, and the symbol of the calf or the bull that represented Baal in the gold in the top left there.
And you've got a sort of an amazing array of emotion portrayed, haven't you? Because you've got then people in the foreground who are covering their faces, most of them bowing down, as we hear in the passage. Just, I think, one person sort of looking up in awe. And you've got the intensity of Elijah, and then you've got these grim faces of the prophets of Baal. And of course, I guess it's hard not to look at this and see the blood red of the sky, and not think of where the story then goes with the prophets of Baal being put to the sword. So it's a judgment. It's the power of God, but it's also that nothing must get in the way of worshipping God. And if it does, then the dangers of that and the need to be cleansed of that. Purified, yeah.
I've just noticed in the bottom of the central panel, there's something that looks like a bush or something, and it's interesting. In the right panel, there's something that looks like a bush as well, and it's made me think of Exodus 3 and the burning bush. All these little motifs that you pick up, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll just read the text for this part. So this is from 1 Kings chapter 18, from verse 38. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering, the wood, the stones, and the dust, and even licked up the water that was in the trench. When all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, "The Lord indeed is God, the Lord indeed is God." I think this is a spectacular story, both of God's power and judgment, an element so frightening as fire, which is just at the Lord's command.
Yeah, and it's interesting given the story and given the sort of the intensity and the heat of it, in the windows right at the very top, a bit of the writing I'm seeing says, "Praise and exalt him above all forever." So that real sense of God as sovereign. And here's what happens when we walk away from that and find another God to follow and to honour.
Yeah, just picking up on that theme of idolatry, I think it's really significant that Ahab, who is king when Elijah is the prophet, is described in 1 Kings 16. Ahab, son of Omri, did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all who were before him. It's sort of this slight suggestion that we've just come to the pinnacle of evil. And in Samuel and Kings, when the writers describe the kings as having done evil in the sight of the Lord, it's always to do with worshipping other gods.
Right.
And Ahab here has married Queen Jezebel, and she worships Baal and all sorts of other gods, and it's her that seeks Elijah's death and pursues him. And Ahab's almost just sort of doing her will, really.
Right. One of the other things I'm noticing is we've got 3 windows that are speaking to each other in a way, because at the center of each of these three there is a shape that is kind of echoed. It's a sort of an altar, a pillar shape, but it's very much a shape about where the power of God and human worship interact. So we had Noah with his altar and the offering of the sacrifice and the Ark of the Rainbow. And then in the middle window, we've got the Ark of the Covenant and the cherubim and the Ark of the stars. And now in this one, we've got the altar and the fire falling from heaven.
Yeah.
So it's as if in each three, there is something that's speaking of the presence of God and our human interactions.
Yeah. It's so clever, actually, isn't it? Because it's sort of echoing the architecture in the chapel with the arches, but also I think the symbolism of that being the sort of all-encompassing presence of God over the world, and yet in you're right, in each of these three, in the centre is that sort of that meeting place, isn't it? The place of worship, actually, or in the case of Elijah, that place of God showing his presence and power on
absolutely.
earth.